So if you look here, under family search, there's these different categories. And here's the family tree. And you can look up your tree. And you can see, oh, that's me. I'm signing in again. So there's several different views of the tree. That's descendancy. And you can see down here, who's that? That's your mom, because she's my child. You can do landscape. And so that shows, there's your mom and your dad. Here we are, and then these are our parents and grandparents on back. You can do a fan chart, you can do all kinds of things. So that's a tree. Here's some search, here's memories, here's other things. Oh, activities. What do you think activities might have in it?
Mm-hmm.
What is an activity? Is that something fun?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's go to activities. Let's see. All activities. Where am I from? Surname origin. All about me. Oh, famous relatives. Here's one. Compare a face. You can put your picture up there and see which ancestry you look most like. Okay, you go to famous relatives. And then, oh my, look at all the people related to George Washington. So this is just famous inventors, scientists, entertainers and artists, church leaders. Oh, who are we related to? Who am I? Oh, look at this. Some pretty awesome people, huh? Wilford Woodruff. Parley P. Pratt. Keep going down, keep going down. Church pioneers. Oh, so these are my pioneers. If Grandpa were signed in, it would be a different list of pioneers. Okay. Trailblazers. All right, here we go. This is mine, so it doesn't say John Alden. But this has a list of Mayflower passenger, Mayflower passenger, Mayflower passenger, Mayflower passenger. All those clear down to there are Mayflower passengers that I am supposedly related to, okay? And we'll talk about some of them, but here it has William Brewster and Mary Brewster. Now, William Brewster was like one of the most prominent of the Pilgrims. Did you know that? That'd be really cool to be related to him. Only problem is I'm not. Because the trouble with family search is there are mistakes. And so all these pages I printed out, and it shows how we're related to each one of the things. So this is me, blah, 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 except I'm not related to Jane Ballinger. It's disproven by DNA. So we are not related to William Brewster. That would be cool, but here's the real thing right here. He would be a cool person to be related to. So that's how you find out who you're related to, but you still have to do your own research and make sure it's right. And I thought I was related to Edward Doty, but I am not. That has been disproven by the Mayflower Society, so it's probably correct that I am not. But guess what? So Grandpa's related. Grandpa's related to John Alden. And this shows all the steps back to get to him, okay? And then there's a little story of John Alden. William Brewster, I told you we're not related to. Catherine Carver. And guess what? Who's related to Catherine Carver? Is that me or Grandpa?
You.
And who's related to... Both of us! We're both related to her. And there's a little story about her. And then I'm related to Francis Cook. And I'll talk about these people for just a minute. Then I thought I was related to Edward Doty, but who's related to Edward Doty?
Grandpa.
So not only is he descended from the cute couple, he's descended from the scallywag. How's that? Not me. All right, let's talk about a few of these people. We talked about John Alden, and we're not related to William Brewster, and we don't know much about her. She died a few weeks. She died in April 21 of apparent sunstroke while working in the fields. So that was short-lived, right? And then Francis Cook is my 10th great-grandfather. And he went to Holland, but he was not a separatist when he went to Holland. He just went to Holland. And he met a lady there, and they belonged to the French Walloon Church, which I've never heard of the French Walloon Church. But they met and they married, and then when the separatists went to Holland, they met up with them, and they were converted in Holland, and they believed it, and so then they came. Well, he and their oldest son came, and his wife and the other children came later. A lot of the others, the rest of their families came in 1623 on the ship Anne, and the rest of his family was that. But he was a wool comber. So Amy, you get it genetically. He was a wool comber. Anyway, Edward Doty, that Grandpa stole from me, and here's the letter from the Mayflower Society saying, nope, he's not my ancestor, he's Grandpa's. Edward Doty was an indentured servant, and he was a stinker. He had a temper, and he got angry easily, and so he was an indentured servant to Stephen Hopkins, and Stephen Hopkins had 2 indentured servants. One was Edward Leicester, I guess you say, and then Edward Doty. Well, those are the 2 that started the fight. And one had a sword, and the other had a dagger, and they each got wounded, and everyone was very upset about this big fight, because they had all promised to get along. So do you know what their punishment was? I said they were put in the stocks, and that's what the lady told us. They weren't put in the stocks. They had their hands tied to their feet behind their backs. And they were supposed to stay that way for 24 hours. But they were both wounded, and they couldn't have food or water, and they cried so humbly, and Stephen Hopkins begged for them to be released, so they only stayed in that tied up position for an hour. Anyway, it was not his last fight. Edward Doty was involved in many, many court cases, always about his either fighting or not paying his bills or selling somebody something that wasn't really good, it was poor quality, or failing to keep his cows fenced, or cheating people. And nothing he ever did was considered really criminal, and he wasn't ever asked to leave the colony. Some of them were asked to leave. If they were too bad, they were told, goodbye, you have to leave. So he stayed, and he married, and he had a large family, but he was kind of always in trouble. So that's Edward Doty. Now, Samuel Fuller. Samuel Fuller came with his brother Edward Fuller. And who's he related to?
Grandpa.
Grandpa, yep. So they were brothers. And we don't know anything about Edward. Why do we not know anything about Edward? Do you suppose? Because he and his wife died the first winter. Those we don't know much about, they died. But they had a 12-year-old son named Samuel, after his brother Samuel. And so this Samuel took in his nephew and raised him. Samuel Fuller was an awesome, oh, I'm related to you too, look at that. Oh, good. Awesome guy. He was a doctor. And he took care of everything. And he would work himself to death just taking care of the sick. And he didn't care if they were the Indians or who they were. He was just a really, really good man. And his wife came later on the Anne in 1623. But he raised his nephew, and he was just an awesome dude. Stephen Hopkins. Now that's the man that owned the indentured servants. And guess who's related to him?
You.
So I was related to his boss. How's that? That's kind of funny. Stephen Hopkins, I had no idea this. He was the one who had been to America before. Before there was, in Virginia, there was another settlement, Jamestown. And he went to Jamestown and left his wife and children and was in Jamestown. I better read it so I get it right. He left 3 children. And he was there in 1609, shipwrecked on the Isle of the Devils, which is Bermuda. And so they were stranded on that island for 10 months. Then they were rescued, and he was involved in a mutiny against the captain, and he was sentenced to death. And he cried about his wife and his children, and they finally let him not be killed. But while he was gone, his wife died, and he went back to England in 1617 and married again. And then they came. He was the one who wanted to go back. He wanted to go back to Virginia. So he thought they were going back to Virginia. And they're the family that had the baby on the trip over. Do you remember what they named the baby? Does anyone know? The only baby born in the ocean. Oceanus. How's that? Unfortunately, little Oceanus only lived to be about 2 is what we guess. But anyway, he ended up, so this is, I'm not related to Edward Doty, the fighter, but Stephen Hopkins ended up getting in trouble because he was very good with the Indians and he helped a lot. But then he started kind of with gambling and serving alcohol and getting in trouble all the time, and he kind of got in trouble for being a little bit loosey-goosey. So now, William Mullins, his grandpa, that's Priscilla Mullins' father, and he was a wonderful man, and he was a shoemaker. And he brought 250 pairs of shoes and 13 pairs of boots with him. And that was a great thing that helped them for a long, long time. But he and his wife both died, and I think their other little son died. But they had a son back in England who then came. But they died the first winter. Henry Sampson is Grandpa's cousin. And he came with the Tillys, and his parents kind of disowned him. And so he came to America with this as a child. And he became a surveyor and marked out all the things. Richard Warren is Grandpa's 10th great-grandfather and my 11th great-grandfather. And he left behind his wife and 5 daughters and came alone. And he was involved in all the early explorations and finding the place and building it. And he was with them when it's what's called the first encounter, and that's when they very first saw the Indians. He was there when they first saw the Indians. But he didn't live very long either. He died in 1628. But his wife and children had come, so they were all there. And then Agnes Tilly is a cousin, and she was related to Henry Sampson, and we don't know much about her either. She died the first winter in Plymouth. So, that's what I learned, and what I knew and what I learned about our Pilgrim ancestors. But I want you to know that they were inspired by Heavenly Father. Without freedom and without America could the gospel have ever been restored. Nope, as long as there's a king in charge, the gospel could not have been restored. So we owe them a huge debt, and Heavenly Father loves them very much, and they made enormous sacrifices for us to have our religious liberty. Anyway, there you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
And I printed this out so you can read it and know more about them if you want.
Oh, awesome.